Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Observation Conversations. My name is Reid.
And I'm Ken.
Oh, I was not expecting that. My whole rhythm was thrown off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is. Did I say Reid? I meant Robert. My name's Robert.
Actually, I shouldn't have sprung you on that. Do you want to just start from the beginning?
No. I like this. I want to.
Okay.
We can use this. Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of Observation Conversations. Today we have something a little bit special that we haven't done before, but something that we've talked about and want to try. It's a new segment called The Great Debate.
The Great Debate.
We each take a side and kind of duke it out in the ring.
Yes.
And come to a conclusion on who is right, who is wrong,
Absolutely.
Who should be praised, who should be shamed. And today, a very obvious topic, I guess. Topic could be one word. Cultural movement is probably what I would use. The Great Barbenheimer debate.
Yes, this has been, I would argue, the cultural event of the summer. I mean, there have been a few contenders, but I don't think anyone has been as explosive and as omnipresent as this one has been. And so, yes, as you said, we are going to do lethal combat in the gladiatorial coliseum of chat as we go head-to-head to figure out once and for all which one of these films reigns supreme. Barbie, Oppenheimer, two films that will forever be linked together in the public consciousness. But which one's the best?
Yeah,
will we answer that question? Let's find out.
Only one way to tell.
Yes.
So what we're gonna do is we've broken up these two movies into various different categories. We've both seen both movies. And so for each question, we will be randomly assigned which movie we have to argue is better. So there's better lead, better cast supporting, better visuals, better soundtrack, better director, better message, and better movie overall.
Yes.
I believe we have a very special wheel that you've created.
We do.
If we want to bring that up.
And here it is. Are you able to see that?
I am able to see that. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Thank
you.
All right, so I suppose we should just jump right in, right?
I think so. I think that we're going to end up digging pretty deep in both of these movies by the end of this. So I think, let's just jump right in. What is our first question?
All right, so the first question is, which movie had the better lead?
All right.
Would you like to spin the wheel?
I will spin the wheel and we will see which side I am arguing for. Looks like I have Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer.
All right, are we arguing on behalf of Margot Robbie?
Okay. Right. Well, who should kick us off?
You spin the wheel, so I think it makes sense if you go first.
Okay. Cillian Murphy's J. Robert Oppenheimer. What a performance. I've already said in my Letterboxd review of Oppenheimer that I think that Cillian Murphy should be in the lead.
Just real quick, we might want to take the wheel down between segments so it's not up the whole time.
There we go. Yes, so I've already said in my Letterboxd review of Oppenheimer that I think that Cillian Murphy should be right now the favorite for Best Actor at next year's Oscars. This man was J. Robert Oppenheimer. I mean, it's so immediately evident what Christopher Nolan saw in this guy, who's been a longtime collaborator of his, for this lead role. Of course, he was Scarecrow in Batman Begins. He was in Inception. He was in Dunkirk. This is a person. He also came back as Scarecrow in The Dark Knight Rises. So this is someone who is one of Christopher Nolan's favorites. Someone who has been a close collaborator over the years and who does fantastic work. I mean, I'm a huge fan of him on Peaky Blinders as Tommy Shelby, a show that I actually just finished rewatching. Anticipation of seeing Oppenheimer. And so I think he's fantastic. I think he does a great job. And this has been the role of his career so far. I mean, it's perfect casting, first of all. I mean, he's got the look down pat, but he also brings a such a constant tension between all of the roles that J. Robert Oppenheimer has to serve and synthesizes them into one performance. You have to be J. Robert Oppenheimer the scientist, J. Robert Oppenheimer the lover, J. Robert Oppenheimer the administrator, the military man, the philosopher, the politician,
communists, the adulterer.
I mean, all of these things. Yeah, exactly. The husband, the father, all of these things. All in one, on top of being, of course, the father of the atomic bomb. There are so many different things going on in this person's life at once, and he brings all of that to every single scene. And I just think that that's so impressive and so difficult to do. I mean, that is a heavy task. I mean, this is a huge movie with a huge cast and huge set pieces and huge dramatic strokes happening, and it's all on his shoulders. I mean, this is very much, for as big of a cast as this is not an ensemble cast. Everyone is orbiting this one man. It's a huge load for one actor to take on, and he does it, and he does magnificently with it, honestly. I was just so impressed with how much of a force he manages to be and how much he brought to the entire thing. And again, I mean, just the thing that leaves me in awe, again, is just how much was on this one actor's shoulders. And he nailed it. That is, I think, the highest accolade I could pay anyone. So, Cillian Murphy, A+, certainly my favorite for Best Actor at next year's Oscars. He deserves all the praise that he's been getting from this and will continue to get from this performance. And yeah, just an absolute delight.
Fair argument. Counter argument. He's a phenomenal actor, but he's always Cillian Murphy. He's very recognizable.
Sure.
Not a bad thing. I mean, he's phenomenal. But you're like, oh, he does a great job. But I would argue that not just for Barbie, but for every role that Margot Robbie stars in, she is that character.
Sure.
Barbie is just Barbie, not Margot Robbie playing Barbie. You look at Suicide Squad, it's just Harley Quinn. It's not Margot, it's just Harley Quinn. Or I, Tonya. I didn't even know Margot Robbie was in that because it was just Tonya. Or like Wolf of Wall Street. She's so good at just becoming this character that her face as an actress kind of disappears almost.
Sure.
And she's so good at kind of pulling you into the story. The only time I was like, oh, this is Margot Robbie during the Barbie movie is when they explicitly called out that it was Margot Robbie in the movie.
Yeah.
And also sorry, I have a fly in my room.
I can see it, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Also, talk about having Cillian Murphy have to playing a ton of different roles as different versions of Oppenheimer because he's a very complicated man.
Yeah.
Try not having to play a person at all.
Well, that's true.
Play a doll. Play an inanimate object and give that character and feelings. That takes talent.
Sure.
That takes hard work.
Yeah, and I see what you mean, but I would maybe, my own counter argument would be to the point about disappearing into a role. I feel like Margot Robbie and Cillian Murphy are at about the same level when it comes to disappearing into a role. And I think that, to your point, look, I love Margot Robbie. I think she does a phenomenal job. I'm very much looking forward to her continuing to be a major force in Hollywood. And she's a very serious actor, and that shows. But I think that Margot Robbie doesn't so much disappear into her roles as she does become synonymous with her roles. Margot Robbie will now be synonymous with Barbie. Barbie, when you think about who is Barbie in the movies, that's Margot Robbie. When you think about who's Harley Quinn in the movies, that's Margot Robbie. I wouldn't say that she's disappeared into those roles, like, for instance, the way like a Heath Ledger disappears into a Joker. I think she becomes synonymous with them, and she makes them her own in a way that's fantastic, in a way that's indispensable. But I wouldn't say she disappears. Like when I'm watching Margot Robbie on screen, I'm usually still pretty aware that that's Margot Robbie, you know. And I think that that's because a lot of that's also just because we haven't seen her in a ton of fantastical stuff. Like Harley Quinn and Barbie are really the two major examples of her existing in a fantastical world. For the most part, she's just playing people. You know, when I think of other Margot Robbie performances, I, Tonya, The Wolf of Wall Street, The Big Short, where in the Big Short's case, she was literally just playing herself. You know, it's you know, she's just playing normal people, and I'm aware that that's Margot Robbie. And so that's my thing about it. But no, she does do a phenomenal job. There's no mistaking that. And she, you know, and just in general, you know, she's now, I mean, she's been a Hollywood A-lister for a while, but now she's like an A++ lister. So,
yeah.
You know, I wish her nothing but the best.
So let me ask you this. Is it better to be watching a movie and be like, oh, that's Margot Robbie, super cool? Or is it better to be watching a movie and go, oh, that's the guy from Peaky Blinders?
I don't think it's wrong either way. I think it's fine either way. But I don't know. I mean, I guess in the broadest sense, I would say better to be an actor. Well, actually, no. Yeah, I don't really see it being. I don't really see there being a problem either way. I would say, yeah, I'm fine with it either way, honestly.
Interesting.
Because I mean, there's, you know, if people know you from something else, you know, I can't really hold that against you, especially if it's something that I like. You know, I mean, it's, you know, Cillian Murphy. What's so great about it for me is that I think for most of us, we've gotten very used to viewing him as a supporting character. You know, again, Batman Begins, Inception, Dunkirk. You know, he's been a phenomenal supporting actor in these Christopher Nolan movies, but we've never seen him in the lead. And I think that it's so wonderful to see someone who has gotten the chance to be that lead man on TV and did such a great job on TV, now getting the shot in the biggest of the big leagues in terms of being the lead in a huge film like this. And so, whereas with Margot Robbie, again, she has her choice of projects. I mean, she can get whatever she wants at this point. And so I feel like even though both are big names and both are big actors, I feel like this is probably a bigger break, so to speak, for Cillian than it was for Margot.
Yeah, and I will say, like, in terms of casting for Barbie, I kind of have to concede that you probably could fill that role with any just like tall blonde actress.
Possible, yeah, pretty much.
You know, in terms of the character she's played, Barbie doesn't have that much range or development.
No, yeah.
It's a pretty common fish out of water story. There isn't too much depth to the character.
Mm-hmm.
So I may have to concede this point to you.
Oh, okay. So
Cillian Murphy is the better lead.
Alrighty, so that's 0.1 for Oppenheimer. Alrighty, so then please, what is our next question?
The next question is, who has the better supporting cast overall?
Okay. All right, so this will be a spin for you.
Yes, this will be my spin.
You will be arguing for Barbie again.
Keep it rolling. All right.
Okay. There we go. All right.
Make sure I got the full list here.
Likewise, let me do the same.
Wow, this is a good amount of people. But I also know that in terms of just sheer numbers, I can't compete with Oppenheimer. There's just no way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Oppenheimer, as you said.
So for me, numbers, the argument is about quality of the supporting cast. And the supporting cast for Barbie as a movie is very, very specific. It's not just extra people in the background, but they have to serve a very specific purpose.
Mm.
One of those purposes is they have to be very attractive. Ken dolls meant to be, a male standard of beauty, very attractive. Who do most men find to be the most attractive actor in Hollywood? Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. Well, that's
9 times out of 10.
Well, you said who would men find in Hollywood today? I feel like if you asked most women, they would probably say Ryan Gosling. But as far as who would most men find attractive?
Actually, no. I've most men think most women would find Ryan Gosling attractive.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I can't argue
For a lot of women and other people, at least from who I've asked, it's usually more like Chris Evans types.
Sure, yeah.
More of those like goofy, funny.
Sure, yeah.
Oddballs. Not oddballs, that's not the right word, but if you still think about, male standard of beauty,
yeah,
it's Ryan Gosling. Filling in as the Ken doll.
Yes.
Who also turns out is incredibly funny and has a beautiful singing voice. Absolutely. Who knew? He was great. They heard him sing in La La Land and they're like, oh, he needs his own single in this movie.
Absolutely.
About the hardships of being a Ken.
Yeah.
Piling on the attractiveness, Simu Liu, 10 Rings, Shang-Chi, gorgeous man.
Very amazing. Much so, yes.
And then you also have the comedic side. You need people who are funny. This is a funny movie. Mm-hmm. How about a comedy legend, Will Ferrell?
That's true. That is true.
He's amazing. Honestly, probably my favorite character in the movie. Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Or Kate McKinnon, also incredibly funny.
Fantastic.
Incredibly talented. I wish she was in more movies. It's kind of a shame that she's almost seems stuck in SNL.
Sure, yeah.
She's wonderful. I think she's great. I'm gonna skip over Michael Cera because
you didn't like Alan?
I loved Alan. I loved Alan as a character.
Alan's great.
I just don't have much to say about Michael Cera as an actor.
Sure, yeah.
But I did love Scott Pilgrim. So, points there, I guess.
Absolutely.
I thought it was just a wonderful, wonderful cast, and also pretty diverse too.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, in 2023, points for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. All good points. All very good points. And even though I really shouldn't stunt on you by reading off a list of these names, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, Josh Hartnett, Casey Affleck, Rami Malek, Kenneth Branagh, Benny Safdie, Jason Clarke, James Darcy, David Dastmalchian, Dane DeHaan, Alden Ehrenreich. Oh my God, Matthew Modine, Josh Peck, fucking Drake and Josh is in Oppenheimer, Jack Quaid. I mean, this cast is on a different planet. I mean, this is. It boggles the mind that we got so many A-listers in a single movie. I mean, in that list, you have people that have headlined huge movies, headlined huge TV shows. Like, for instance, what's his name? Jack Quaid from The Boys. He's a main character on The Boys, and he's like 25 names down on this list. Alden Ehrenreich, he was Han Solo. He's like 15 names down. Dane DeHaan was the Green Goblin. Jason Clarke is in a bunch of huge movies. Benny Safdie's directed huge movies. Kenneth Branagh directed and acted in huge movies. He's Hercule Poirot. You've got Iron Man in this. You've got Jason Bourne in this. You've got Mary Poppins in this. You've got Yelena Belova in this. I mean, Rami Malek. You've got Freddie Mercury. I mean, Jesus Christ. It's like, it's crazy. And so, yeah, this cast list is just unbelievable. And I couldn't tell you that there's a bad apple in the bunch. Even, again, Josh Peck from Drake and Josh is the man, and spoilers, by the way, for this whole video, he's the man who actually presses the button to launch the Trinity test. Drake and Josh push the button that brought us into the nuclear age. Isn't that crazy? I mean, like, literally, you have big names that are in relatively small parts, but everybody kills it. I don't know what else to say. Starting with Robert Downey Jr. I mean, we just have to start there. Robert Downey Jr. as Louis Strauss.
Probably gonna win an Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, he brings it. I mean, you can just tell. Listen, we all love him as Tony Stark. I mean, he was the only person for that role. That will forever be the role that he's most synonymous with. But you can tell, you could also tell that, especially by the end, he was kind of chomping at the bit for something meatier. And he clearly wasn't objecting when they killed him off at the end of Endgame. And you could tell this is what it was for. Not that terrible Doolittle movie that he made a few years ago. This is the kind of substance he was waiting for. And this was just the role for him. I mean, he gets to be malevolent and scheming and vicious in a way that we have not seen him in a very long time. And I just think he killed it. Obviously, Emily Blunt as Kitty Oppenheimer, phenomenal job. She has a great scene at the end of the movie at the Oppenheimer interrogations. Matt Damon as General Groves, fantastic. Florence Pugh as Jean Tatlock.
Did you ever see Chernobyl?
I did, yeah.
I really enjoyed the kind of pairing of like the scientist and the general.
Oh yeah.
With Oppenheimer and I forget the general's name compared to Chernobyl. But I will say I hated Matt Damon in that role.
Oh, you didn't like him?
No, because it literally just felt like I was watching Matt Damon in a mustache pretending to be a different character.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't know like why I felt that way. It just didn't really feel like, I don't know. Maybe I was just thinking, oh, this should be like an older person.
Sure.
It was a little bit gruffer. Because it was literally like, oh, Matt Damon has like a fake mustache on and he's like parading around as a general. So that was like the one casting decision I wasn't a huge fan of.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the casting or just the acting for that one role. But everything else was so good.
And for me, I think my version of that was Will Ferrell in Barbie, because I don't know. I mean, a lot of them, I get what they were going for, but a lot of the Mattel stuff just kind of fell flat for me. Like I could understand why they were doing it, but it all felt a little bit goofy for the real world. Like it would have fit perfectly in Barbie Land, but for the real world, it all felt a little bit too goofy to be believed. I think that for me that would be my version of that. But yeah, I didn't mind him. I think that being just kind of the straight-laced military man suits Matt Damon pretty well. As I said, I don't think there's a bad apple in the bunch here.
No, my only like counter argument, which is honestly kind of a Hail Mary because I already know the answer to this, but for such a large cast, were they like utilized effectively? Because a lot of them only had like a couple minutes of screen time.
Well, that's the thing, yeah.
But they were also like kind of begging to be on this project. They're like, oh, I want to be in a Christopher Nolan movie. I don't care if I'm like a background character effectively. Yeah. So it's really hard to argue against that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely when you have just so many huge names, you can't feature everybody. But I think that everybody did a great job, and also some of the lesser known names like Tom Conti as Albert Einstein. I loved Einstein in this. I thought he was great. A fantastic job. Yeah. And then there's a lot of other great names like that, like Jefferson Hall as Chevalier. I thought was great. And so, yeah, I think that everybody did a great job. And as I said, Killian, Emily, Matt, Robert, Florence Pugh, grinding on Oppenheimer while making him read Vedic poetry. That was awesome. I mean, who thought we were going to get an origin story for I am become Death, the Destroyer of Worlds? Like that was like an almost like like Marvel setup for like, oh, that's going to come back later on. I bet he's going to say that at the Trinity test. But yeah, just fantastic all around. Again, it's you have Cillian Murphy is Oppenheimer, who's doing a phenomenal job, and then you have all of these people orbiting him, supporting him, setting him up to be the centerpiece, but doing a great job and bringing so much themselves. It's just fantastic, and I think it's got to be one of the craziest cast lists that I'll ever see, just ever. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I remember just like I knew this had a stacked cast, but just like sitting in the theater and be like, oh my god, it's that person. Oh my god, it's that person. Like every 15 minutes.
Literally,
just
yeah.
Like, yeah, this is another point for Oppenheimer. There's no way. No, there's no way I can compete. You just started like reading off the list, and it was just like, no, it's over.
Alrighty then. So then I guess let's switch back to the wheel. Here we go. All right, what's next? Next question.
Next question, better visuals.
Better visuals. Okay, this will be interesting. All right, I am arguing for Barbie. Okay.
All righty.
We switch sides.
Very cool.
Okie dokie. Let's do it. All right. So,
Jago,
Barbie.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Why does Barbie have the better visuals?
I think that Barbie does. So, yeah, when we talk about visuals, we're not just talking about CGI special effects. I'm taking the holistic everything.
Yeah, frame,
the
color,
overall,
composition.
Exactly, yeah. The aesthetics of the film, the sets, the costumes, the special effects, everything. And I think that there's absolutely.
Well, that's good because I forgot to add costumes as a.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, so we'll just throw it into this.
Yeah, we'll incorporate this.
And I think there is a legitimate argument to say that Barbie has the more impressive visuals over Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer's visuals are phenomenal. And there are moments in that film that are lots of moments that are truly beautiful. But we've seen a lot of movies set in the 1940s. All right. I mean, Christopher Nolan just made one in Dunkirk. I mean, if you want a World War II movie, there's a million of them. If you want a movie set in this time period, there's a million of them. I don't know that we've ever seen a film that looks quite like Barbie. Like the way that film looks, the way Barbie Land looks, the way how specific it is, how accurate to the toys it is, how bright and colorful it is, how vivid the costumes are. I think there's absolutely an argument to be said that Oppenheimer is beautiful, but there's a lot of movies that look like it, whereas I couldn't tell you a movie that really looks like Barbie. Maybe, like, if you go back, like, you could say that it's essentially like a version of The Wizard of Oz, right? It's kind of like that. But of course, the Barbie aesthetic with the hot pink and all the bright colors, like, that's totally unique. And so, even though you could say that, well, there's versions of this story and there's versions of these settings that we've seen before, they've never looked like this. Whereas I could point to, 24 other great movies set in World War II in the 1940s that look a lot like Oppenheimer. And so, including, again, another movie that Christopher Nolan also just made recently. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the costumes were gorgeous. I think the Barbie Land sets were phenomenal. I loved all the transitions in between the real world and Barbie Land, where they have to get on the car, to the boat, to the spaceship, to the I forget what, the snowmobile, so the bicycle, to the real world. I thought that that was phenomenal. I even a few days ago I saw a featurette about how they actually captured that, and how it was 100% practical. When those waves are going up and down, someone's physically moving them up and down like that, and it feels almost like a stage play brought to life so vividly. And I think that also the visuals play such a huge part in making Barbie as joyful as it is and as energetic as it is. Again, it's almost impossible not to when you're just surrounded by all these bright colors all the time and all. And again, it's like they really did bring this toy world to life, like all the Barbie dream houses and the beach, because of course Kens, they don't swim, they're not qualified to lifeguard, but they do beach. Just that whole "I'm Just Ken" sequence, I adored. I mean, that song, and I put this in my Letterboxd review as well. "I'm Just Ken" right now has my vote for the best piece of cinematic music that we've gotten this year. I love that song. And also that sequence, that set piece was amazing. The huge like beach war between the Kens, awesome. Like, again, you've never seen anything quite like that. And so I think Barbie, a huge part of its success is how visually exciting it is, how unique it is, how you really can't point to another movie that looks like this. And yeah, I just think it's so brilliantly realized down to the details. So yeah, I think that there is very much an argument for Barbie.
That's fair. That's very fair. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of in a tough position because, like, personally, I was also kind of thinking, like, Barbie definitely feels a lot more unique in terms of visuals. You're right, there aren't really any movies out there like it. So I kind of have to go, like, for the sake of arguing for Oppenheimer,
Sure.
I kind of have to go down like a dirtier route, which is to say, like, which of these do you think people are going to be talking about in like film school? Which do you think would be shown in a classroom? And you know that has a lot of like systemic issues with it too, because you know Christopher Nolan is just kind of an established, and Greta Gerwig, you know, as a woman is probably not going to achieve as high a level of notoriety, even if she deserves to.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
But you know, this is a Christopher Nolan movie. There was a reason why there was tons of support behind it. A lot of people wanted to be on board with it. People love Christopher Nolan, and if there's anything he's known for, it's for great visuals.
Yep.
You think Inception, you think Interstellar. He's a phenomenal director. Personally, I haven't seen Dunkirk, but I know there's a lot of World War II movies out there, but this one probably looks better than most of them, just because he knows what he's doing behind the camera. I will say, this movie definitely felt a little bit more subtle in terms of visuals compared to what he's done in the past. You know, you don't have like these giant black holes or, you know, the sky bending upwards. But, you know, the kind of essence of the particles and like creating fusion and the way he represents that with these flashes of beautiful lights and imagery, symmetry, these kind of weird colors and movements and you know, sparks and ashes, and you know, that's all you kind of need to show. It's just little hints of these things, and it kind of, because really it's about conveying an image that describes something that's invisible, something you can't see. You can't see down on the molecular level.
Yeah.
So the fact that he can visualize that in a way that emotionally connects with the audience
Absolutely.
is pretty incredible.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, just some of the effects he uses, like, you know, Oppenheimer's like in the conference room, and all of a sudden everything goes to like this blinding white light, everything's super overexposed, as if there's a bomb going off in the room.
Yep.
Brilliant. Like that's really cool, and what an interesting way to show anxiety around a real world event. Or, you know, when he's concluding at Los Alamos, and you know, talking to the other scientists, he steps away from the podium, and all of a sudden he's stepping into an ashen skull of a Hiroshima or Nagasaki victim.
Yeah.
And it's just transition to that, and then he lifts his foot and he's back in the auditorium. It's shocking.
Yeah.
And it's effective without being over the top.
Yeah.
And I think Barbie had to rely on being super in your face, super bright, super colorful. Whereas Oppenheimer is very, very subtle touches that really make it kind of visually distinct and stylistically distinct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I'm of course still arguing for Barbie, but these are two movies that do a phenomenal job in the visual department. I mean, the visions of the atomic world and the molecular world, that was impressive enough, but also, like you said, I mean, that scene in the auditorium after the Trinity test is haunting, because he goes in there and he's trying to give this speech, and the audio is just fading out until it's just silence, and
Silence,
then
and then the rumbles of an explosion mixed with the like stomping of the feet.
oh my god, and he's imagining, yeah, he's imagining all these people being wiped out in an atomic blast, and it's such a brilliant way to depict why this man became so tortured in his later life, because he knew he did his job, he made a miracle happen. He served his country. Maybe he won the fucking war, but he knew this is not going to end here. This is going to go on. And next
hundreds
time,
of thousands on
exactly.
his hands.
Yeah, and next time, what if it's us? That's what he knew. And it's haunting. That scene is haunting. The scene in the interrogation room is haunting. And of course, and that's before we even talk about the finale, where, you know, he's imagining himself in the cockpit of the Spitfire, but this time it's not V2 rockets, it's nuclear missiles.
Yeah.
And I mean, that last shot.
You don't even need to show like the missiles, though. That's the thing. You can just show like the billows of smoke going up into the sky.
Which that was also.
And like, you get it.
Yeah.
Or just,
it's terrifying.
You know, using like black and white to represent the future,
yes,
as a way to kind of distinguish between positions and time, but also show like maybe this isn't like as relevant to his life, or to show kind of where he's at emotionally, where after he's gone through kind of all this trauma and depression about dealing with the fact that, oh, I just killed tons of people. In the future, he's just kind of not fully there, and that's that's a way of interpreting it.
And of course, all of this is before we even addressed the big one, which is of course the Trinity test itself.
Yes. Yeah.
And how Christopher Nolan. See, now I'm all about making your point for you, but of course
that's what happens though.
I think
both are so good.
No, they
like
are.
I said
they
at
really
the beginning,
are.
I thought Barbie was a lot more unique, but they both have amazing elements.
Oh, to be sure. And I mean, of course, I think the Trinity test is the most well-known backstory of what it was like making this movie, or, you know, like the behind-the-scenes story. Because, of course, Christopher Nolan, he took his entire production out to New Mexico for real, and he promised, this has been one of the things that we've been most looking forward to since we heard about it last year. Christopher Nolan actually went out into the desert to do a practical recreation of an atomic blast. And it's like, what the fuck is that going to look like? You know, no CGI, an actual explosion. And we see it in the movie.
And I assume he didn't actually make an atomic blast.
No, it was not an
powerful enough to mimic it.
Yeah, it was a very big blast of conventional explosives. But yeah, it looks like an atomic blast for all intents and purposes. And it looks magnificent in the film. I mean, it's almost too much to comprehend when you're watching it. I mean, it's at first there's the silence, right? The bomb drops. Then you see the light. Everybody's got to shield themselves. And then after a few seconds, you look over and it's just this unbelievably massive column of fire. Like not even just straight fire. 200 feet in the air, just billowing out in all directions. And then, of course, you have the shock wave, which blows out windows and windshields. And it just keeps going. And then you get the mushroom cloud. And it's just, it's unbelievable what you're seeing. And especially when you know this is something that was practically recreated with, again, conventional explosives, but still doesn't look it.
That's the thing, too. You know, if you talk about effects, like, I'm sure the explosion was also enhanced by CGI.
Sure, probably a little bit.
I would find it really hard to believe that it was 100% practical, but there is a very kind of specific art to practical effects when it comes to explosions.
Sure.
And certain balances of chemicals and products that you use, and maybe you want more of a fireball, or maybe you want billowing smoke. These are all things that you can control beforehand in the kind of balance of ingredients. Obviously, Christopher Nolan was not, you know, the demolitions expert. He wasn't handling these, but he probably had an idea for, oh, this is how I want this explosion to look.
Definitely.
And then the demolitions experts will kind of calculate, okay, these are the materials we need in these ratios.
Yeah.
I've never seen a proper atomic blast, but my guess would be,
thank God,
not much of a fireball. Well, there's an initial fireball, but like I imagine it would be a lot of smoke, and like visually not the most interesting. So Christopher Nolan would have had the foresight to say, "Oh, I want a column of fire, not a
Yeah.
column of smoke or just like standard explosion.
Yeah.
I want it to be, the whole thing is lighting up."
Yes.
Um, and that's just
He pulled
cool.
it
The
off.
fact that
Yeah.
like you can design explosions
Yeah. Oh yeah.
is just really impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, it has to be without a doubt one of the most impressive explosions we've ever seen on screen. I mean,
Yeah.
I honestly I would truly struggle to come up with, contenders in that category. It is unbelievable, and
And again,
it's
handled tastefully too.
very much so.
There's a
Very
lot
much
of
so.
movies where they'll like show the big explosion and then they'll like cut it in several times at different angles and
Yeah.
then finally do it in slow motion. Or they just have this big explosion and they hold on to it for like a full minute.
Yeah.
And so with this, it was like that, like as amazing as the visuals were around this explosion, that actually wasn't even the focus.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because the majority of that sequence was Oppenheimer kind of stumbling around in this
Mm.
silence.
Yes.
Um, and cutting to the people watching the explosion and how they're bathed in light and pushed by the shockwave, and not the actual fireball itself, too.
Yeah. No,
Like
absolutely.
it played such a small part in the scene,
Definitely. I
even
mean,
though the
and
scene's about the explosion. It's wild.
exactly. And you'll note that there is only one explosion that you see in Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
You don't see Hiroshima, you don't see Nagasaki,
which I
you
was
don't
actually
see.
really surprised about.
Yeah, I thought that. I mean, I didn't know how much they would show us, but I thought they would at least show us, like, the bomb being loaded onto the plane and then the plane taking off.
Or
But,
like maybe he would have incorporated like real world footage of like post bombings and
yeah,
like
no, yeah,
video footage of the destruction of the
absolutely.
two, but that
But yeah,
was literally
you
just
yeah, you don't see Hiroshima, you don't see Nagasaki, you don't see the H-bomb test. The only explosion you see in the entire movie is the Trinity test. And I thought that was so brilliant because honestly, you can't take your eyes off it. You knew going into this movie this is what you were going to get, but when it finally arrives you're still not ready for it. And that's the only explosion you get because ultimately it's this is a war film set in World War II, but clearly Christopher Nolan isn't as interested in World War II because we all know the outcome of that, and he's more interested in what is the consequences of entering the atomic age. What were the consequences on Oppenheimer's life? And I thought that was such a brave choice, and I think ultimately a correct choice, just to have one explosion, the Trinity test.
yeah.
Leave everything else to your imagination.
And not to be reductive, but how many explosions did Barbie have?
About 7, I think, right? But yeah, both gorgeous movies, incredibly successful in their visuals, and yeah, I mean, I think we can call this a wash. I would say because they're both so good in their own ways.
You think this has to be a tie?
I think it has to be, honestly. I wouldn't want to take away from one movie when they both do such a good job.
That's fair. They're both very, very different. Um,
And very successful in their own ways.
yeah, they both kind of achieve what they set out to do.
Yes.
All right, so
Alrighty.
now this will be my spin, arguing for better soundtrack.
Better soundtrack. Interesting. Okay. Who will you be arguing for? Looks like you've got
Oppenheimer again.
Ludwig Göransson's score for Oppenheimer.
So I will say Ludwig Göransson, he's like relatively new
Hmm.
on the kind of Hollywood music scene.
Yes.
At least that's been my understanding. The first kind of time I experienced his music was watching The Mandalorian
Hmm.
season 1, and I was just kind of blown away by the
Sure.
music. I think he's so talented. I loved in that stuff how he incorporated more like hip hop elements and
Mm-hmm.
beats. Obviously, we don't really have that in this film. This is a lot more of a kind of classical,
Yes.
not classical, like classic movie score style. Um, but very, very emotionally effective. And I think, the theme is very iconic, and the best way I can point out to that is like seeing people use it all over TikTok
Mm.
and kind of recreating moments from the film or just moments of seriousness and pairing it with this beautiful score, um, which I can't really sing for you because I know I'll butcher it. But it's kind of, you have like these wavering arpeggios,
Oh yeah.
and like this building tension, especially when you pair it with like the low rumblings from explosions or the footsteps or kind of different points in the film. Um, it sweeps you along,
Oh, very
and
much
it
so.
it really I felt like this was one of those scores that really pulls you into the movie.
Mm,
And like every time I hear it in my head, I'm also like seeing part of the movie too.
definitely.
um I don't know, I don't have like too much to say, because I don't really know how to talk about
Mm.
movie scores that much, but other than I thought it was really good and I liked it.
And it
I
was.
thought it was really effective. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yes, Barbie, soundtrack by Mark Ronson and Andrew Wyatt. I'm not too familiar with Andrew Wyatt, but I do know Mark Ronson. He was a longtime collaborator of Macklemore. If you remember him.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, no, he's that guy. So he's a pretty big name in the music producer world. And as far as I can tell, he hasn't done a movie score before this. I think this is his first movie score. But yeah, no, also with what's his face, Bruno Mars as well. He did Uptown Funk, and yeah, a lot of those a lot of those songs as well.
Was he acting in more of a producer role for these?
No, he did the soundtrack. It's his name on the soundtrack, and
No, but
so
for the like Macklemore and Bruno Mars.
yeah, no, yeah, he was the producer of those as
Okay.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so pretty big name music producer, but first film score as far as I can tell, and I think he did a terrific job. I mean, I think that for Barbie, the soundtrack does take a little bit of a backseat to the featured songs, which I think the featured songs are overwhelmingly pretty great as far as I could tell. I mean, I liked almost pretty much all of the music in Barbie. But as far as his soundtrack specifically, I thought that was really terrific too, because it's very fun, it's very funky, and I just think that, as you're saying, I listen to certain tracks and I know exactly where I am in the film, and it does go through different things, but I just liked how carefree it was and how funky it was. Honestly, it was just like a really fun soundtrack for a really fun movie, which very nicely complemented the featured songs as well. And I never felt like it was a distraction from those, or was trying to do anything other than support them and set them up well and pay them off well. um and as I said as well, I'm Just Ken, love that song. Just a ton of great music in this. And so, I mean, here I can pull up some of the other ones here. You've got Dance the Night by Dua Lipa. You've got Nicki Minaj in here, Ice Spice, Charlie XCX, Sam Smith, Tame Impala. I mean, Haim, Billie Eilish. Big names as far as the featured musicians. So it was great. Honestly, I think it's a big part of the movie. In fact, this really is a comedy musical in many ways. Music is a
Yeah.
very significant part of what this movie is. And
That's
so,
that's
yeah.
that's actually one thing I really liked too about Barbie is that like, it had like a dedicated soundtrack,
Mm,
with like specific songs.
yeah.
Whereas if you compared that to like the Black Panther movie where they had a soundtrack and they like collaborated with these different artists to
Mm,
produce songs, but the songs didn't make it into the movie.
right.
So I'm glad with Barbie that they did, and it was like, each one kind of corresponded to an emotional beat within the movie. Um, yeah, I mean they were a lot of fun for
Oh,
sure.
definitely, definitely, yeah. And as far as Ludwig in Oppenheimer, he had some very big shoes to fill because, of course, Chris Nolan's favorite collaborator is Hans Zimmer. Those two
Yeah.
are like separated at the hip, but Hans Zimmer wasn't available to do this one, and so he turned to Ludwig Göransson. And I really like his stuff. He did a great job on The Mandalorian. Did a fantastic job with Black Panther. Won an Oscar for
Hmm.
that. And so I was very excited to see what he was going to bring into this because, as you said, I think he's probably most known for bringing, kind of those hip hop inflected beats into these, these sweeping movie scores. And of course, that doesn't really work for, in those kind of that electronic flair. But you can't really do that in a World War II movie. So,
although they did do that, not the beats, but like the electronic sound in God, what was it? Like the Warfront movie, where it's about the German kids.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, in that one where they just had this electronic like bow wow wow. I thought that did not fit at all, even though like that score won an Oscar, but I was like that. Sounds bad.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Honestly, it's been on my list forever. I still haven't brought myself to watch it, but yeah, no, I think that he did a phenomenal job. It's what I like about it is that it's not quite as in your face as a Hans Zimmer score, but it's certainly no less loud. Like, this soundtrack can get loud, and I think just overall the sound design in Oppenheimer is one of its best assets. The way we transition from huge noise to silence to huge noise. It's incredibly
that dynamic
effective.
Range, that contrast.
Absolutely.
That makes it so effective. And like that's the weirdly paradoxical thing about not necessarily soundtracks, but like scores in general, is that their goal is to be not noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their goal is to enhance the emotions without drawing too much attention to themselves, which is like, it's such a weird goal, and that makes it hard to like kind of judge them on how successful they are or not.
Right.
And obviously it depends on the movie. Like something like Indiana Jones, that that has like a musical epic that's not gonna like sit quietly in the background. But I thought this one picked its moments very well, when to have the score flare up and when to be
quiet,
invisible,
subdued. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, two fantastic soundtracks. My vote, gosh, this is tough. This is tough again.
I mean, I think the big thing here is, does the kind of individual songs of Barbie count towards the overall soundtrack, or should those be considered a separate element?
Yeah,
because they're not part of the score. Personally, I feel like they were designed to be part of the movie.
Yes, absolutely.
And that they should be included. But...
And that's what I was gonna say, is that, like, for instance, if we were talking about like Shang-Chi, which had a lot of featured music as well, I would say let's not include the featured songs, because it's a superhero movie, where the songs aren't the point, like, they're nice, and when they pop up there it's cool, but like the soundtrack as it is the point. With this, because I feel like it is a comedy musical,
and they break into dance numbers.
Literally, it's a musical. It is a musical. And so I think that because it's a musical, I think we should include it. And that if we do include the featured songs, my vote would go to Barbie. I think that just because there are just so many great the soundtrack is good, but then it's coupled with some really great standout featured songs, including, again, I'm Just Ken, which I think is the best piece of cinematic music we've yet gotten this year. So, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I brought up the TikTok thing, and like all of those Barbie songs are also all over TikTok.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
Because they're so fun. I don't know. I mean, they're different, and they both have different goals. But I think if you were to look at it concretely, like, which is going to have more listens, the Barbie album or the Oppenheimer soundtrack on Spotify, it's going to be Barbie.
Almost certainly,
yeah.
Alrighty.
So far, you're kind of dominating the debate with 3 wins, but in terms of Oppenheimer versus Barbie, it seems like Oppenheimer is winning so far.
Yeah, how many for each so far?
So better lead, That was your argument for Oppenheimer. Better cast / supporting. That was your argument for Oppenheimer. Better visuals was a tie. Better soundtrack was your argument for Barbie.
Okay, so yeah, so Oppenheimer 2, Barbie 1, and 1 tie. All right, well, let's see if we can't break this open. What's our next category?
Better director.
Ooh, okay. This is going to be very interesting. All right, so this is a spin for me, right?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Who do I have? Two great directors here. I have Christopher Nolan. All right. And you have Miss Gerwig. All right, Christopher Nolan. What can I say that hasn't already been said? Christopher Nolan is without a doubt one of my favorite directors working today. He directed the one movie that that over the years I've confidently been able to say could be my favorite movie of all time. And anybody who knows me knows there's so many movies that I've seen and that I love and that that could arguably be my favorite of all time. But there's only one movie that I've ever seen that has consistently landed in that debate, and that is The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is a treasure. It's a masterpiece. It's the rare movie that I would argue is borderline flawless, and I do not say that lightly. Christopher Nolan was one of the best. Not just the best we have now, but the best ever. He's certainly one of the biggest name directors out there today. He's one of the few directors that can sell a movie based off of his name alone, not a premise, not a character, not even a lead actor. Him, he's the attraction.
Yeah.
That's very, very rare nowadays. And yeah, he's made so many movies that I love. He did The Prestige. All of the Dark Knight films I thought were great. Inception, Interstellar. I mean, come on, the Dunkirk. I mean, it's unfair. Honestly, the only movie that I've seen of his that I haven't really enjoyed was Tenet. I just never could get into Tenet. I think that like the whole time moving backwards and forwards thing, like that could be cool and that could be executed well, but I feel like that movie's script was so far up its own ass. It forgot to take the rest of us along for the ride. Like honestly, I just couldn't follow what was happening half the time. And so I didn't love Tenet, but everything else has been fantastic. Truly everything. And so Christopher Nolan is one of our most treasured directors, as he should be. I will show up for anything he makes. And in this, I mean, God, what can I say? I mean, you could point to any one of his films or almost any one of his films and say that's his magnum opus. And this is one of them. This is another one that you could argue is his magnum opus. Certainly in terms of having a huge cast of this size. It's the biggest he's ever worked with. And doing stuff like the Trinity test is one of the biggest set pieces that he's ever attempted. And this is a man with a noted love for doing things practically, but he's never done anything like this practically. Like this is his biggest effort as far as doing stuff on a practical scale.
I was actually going to say that's probably why we didn't see any footage of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, because he would have wanted to do it practically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think he does a phenomenal job. Again, for that a movie this sprawling, like look at the ground we cover from the beginning to the end of Oppenheimer, from Oppenheimer's early career to before the war to years after the war. We cover so much ground. We have so much story to tell. We have so many different avenues to explore. And the fact that it feels this cohesive, a sprawling 3-hour movie feels this cohesive is the ultimate testament to this guy's skill. He gets great performances out of his actors. He knows exactly how he wants stuff to look and how he wants it to feel, how he wants it to play out. He's just one of the best. He's one of the best, and I'm certainly in awe of what he's achieved on a technical scale in this movie. And this movie also has all of the great Chris Nolan trademarks, like the interweaving storylines moving backwards and forwards in time.
That man does not like a linear story.
He does not. He does not. He wants to tell the story from the beginning to the end to the middle, back to the beginning, back to the end. It's like, that's just how he does it, but it works. Somehow it works. And so, yeah, phenomenal director, did a phenomenal job. One of the greats of all time, in my opinion. just an absolute treasure.
Yeah, no, this is true. I mean, he's really, really great. It's definitely a tough competition because, you know, Greta Gerwig as a director hasn't really done all that much. I mean, just on IMDb, there's only 5 entries. And the only one that like, or there's 2 that are very notable, which are Lady Bird and Little Women.
Mm.
But aside from that, there's Nights and Weekends, which I haven't heard of. Dua Lipa Dance the Night, which is, I guess, a music video from Barbie, and then Barbie.
Right.
So for her to have so little under her belt, and yet to be in charge of such a big project, and one that, you know, has done so well, I think is pretty incredible.
Oh, to be sure.
It's very clear to me that she is well studied. You know, she had that whole like 2001: A Space Odyssey sequence.
Oh yeah.
With Barbie, which was just kind of hilarious, and that shows that, you know, not only does she have her own distinct style visually with the Barbie movie, but she knows how to replicate other styles. She has a lot of tools in the tool belt. You know, you talk about Christopher Nolan liking to do things practically. I say look at, you know, all of the sets that they use. Look at the transition pieces between Barbie Land and the real world. All of that was practical, and it looked amazing.
Amazing.
You know, this is someone who also understands the beauty of practical effects. And it's not just like TNT go boom. You know, it's, you know, the sets and the costumes, and it's all tangible.
Sure.
I think she definitely understands the relationship between tangibility and kind of how that connects with an audience.
Absolutely.
I will say Barbie is a lot more surreal, whereas you know, Oppenheimer is definitely more realistic.
Yeah.
I think all of Christopher Nolan's movies are a little bit more grounded. And personally, I'm a fan of surrealism.
Sure.
Like, I eat that shit up.
Yeah.
I think
too.
it's great. Like the fucking the corporate chase, which is running through the building, and it becomes this choreographed thing where they're running through this perfect grid of cubicles. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but like visually, it's just such a delight.
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun.
It's really fun. I thought it was great. You know, in terms of storytelling, I think there's a time and place for chopping up time. I don't know if a biopic is the right place to do that. And at least Greta Gerwig knows how to tell a linear story.
Sure.
You know, was that story as interesting or deep as Oppenheimer? I wouldn't say so. But also, you know, at the same time, subversive.
Sure.
You know, I was going into the movie, I was convinced it was going to be, okay, Barbie leaves Barbie Land and then like learns about herself in the real world, and then like helps this mother and daughter come together, and then goes back to Barbie Land. No, it turns out they go to the real world and then come back to Barbie Land only to find out that it's been taken over by patriarchy, and then they have to save Barbie Land. And it's like a complete different direction than I thought.
Yeah.
But it works flawlessly.
Yeah, it becomes Animal Farm by the end, if you think about it.
No, but I thought it was terrific. Yeah, I mean, it's this is one of those things where it's also hard to say because they're both so different. Like visually, stylistically, and also just the stories that they're telling.
Yeah.
It's hard to create distinct one-to-one comparisons.
It is.
Other than saying like they both know the beauty of practical effects, which is really good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She doesn't have the track record that Christopher Nolan does, but
she doesn't.
I say she's not yet, but she's, you know, on her way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I will say that the films that I only know of 2 Greta Gerwig films before this one, Lady Bird, which got nominated for Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think she got nominated as well for Best Director. She may have even won. This was a few years back.
It was 2017.
Okay, yeah. and then as well as Little Women, which I also didn't see. I haven't seen either of these, but I've heard very good things about both of them. I know people like them, especially that Little Women movie. So this was my first Greta Gerwig film, and I was very impressed, honestly. And so, yeah, I would say that it's tough to say, obviously, because I mean these are two very different directors directing two very different films. But I would be open to saying this one was a tie, but I would also defer to you because I would say that relative to the degree of difficulty, I would say that actually Greta Gerwig had the more difficult task. And
yeah, because she had a larger leap from previous movie to Barbie.
Yes,
absolutely. Versus, you know, Christopher Nolan just kind of hops from blockbuster to blockbuster.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's kind of already on that level. He's already kind of considered a Hollywood auteur, has a tons of followers. That's like kind of the main reason he's allowed to shoot in 70 millimeter IMAX film, because like he's the only director that Hollywood is like, all right, just let him do whatever he wants. He clearly wants to shoot in film. Let him shoot in film.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, just the fact that this is a big budget comedy that just made over $1 billion at the box office in 3 weeks. Think about that. Comedy, like straight comedies, are virtually dead at the theater now. Like, you know, I mean, surely you get comedic elements in other movies, but like you don't see comedies like The Hangover anymore, or like, you know, Neighbors anymore. Like they're just gone. Now they're all on streaming. And so the idea that Greta Gerwig can come in with a toy property and make it the biggest comedy of the year, the biggest musical of the year, gross over $1 billion, you know, off of only just 2 like relatively big movies before this.
Not just that, but make the movie itself a cultural movement and a cultural icon.
Absolutely. It's huge.
I will say too, like on the other hand, I personally felt like for a Christopher Nolan film, this one was almost like a little underwhelming. I think that may have just been like previous conditioning where I'm expecting like super over the top visuals. Like again, Interstellar and Inception are kind of my go-to examples.
Sure, yeah.
Interstellar, they literally like created a new physics simulation system and calculated what a black hole would look like, and then ended up indirectly helping the scientific community. But like, you know, just this amazing image of the black hole or the different planets, or like the 4D like library space that he's like existing in.
Tesseract.
Yeah. And then, you know, you look at Oppenheimer, and the cool thing is like the explosion, and there's a lot of like subtle stuff, but it's also just like, oh, it's a town in the desert and a college campus classrooms. The scale of it definitely felt smaller. Again, I haven't seen Dunkirk. I don't know what that was like. Obviously didn't see Tenet, but that also would have been considered like a larger scale.
I guess so, yeah. Maybe.
So I don't know. I was like, there were parts where I was like a little underwhelmed, but I also don't think it was that type of movie.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, definitely, it's not as bombastic as Inception or Interstellar. Like those movies are arresting.
But it's also not trying to at the same time.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, it's I mean, because those are like thoroughly we're in a surrealist world movies where we can just make up rules. I mean, as you said, Interstellar. One of the beautiful things about the movie is how closely they do try to stick to actual science, not just make stuff up. Yeah. But I mean, it's like we're seeing impossible things play out on screen, and they're beautifully realized. With this, we're firmly rooted in history and we're firmly rooted in the possible. And so you can't do a lot of that crazy stuff. And I think that he tried to bring in a little bit of that with the visions of the atomic world. But yeah, you're limited to what is realistically feasible, which you can still do a lot with, as we saw, but yeah, it's certainly not as instantly iconic as an Inception or an Interstellar, where you're seeing a city fold in on itself, or a lifelike, an accurate depiction of what we think a black hole looks like, and stuff like that. And so I would say, I would say, again, both phenomenal, but I would defer to Greta Gerwig, since if that's your position.
Yeah, in this specific instance, if it was like Barbie versus any other Nolan movie, I think Nolan would be the better director. But in this specific instance, just kind of they started off on unequal footing, but ended up on pretty equal footing. That says a lot.
So. Oh, absolutely. There's gonna be a lot of attention now paid to the next Greta Gerwig movie, whatever that may be. She's made a very big name for herself.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next and penultimate topic.